Fraudulent rental applications are becoming a growing problem in Ontario, with some reports showing that up to 50% of applications in the Toronto area include fake documents like forged credit reports, counterfeit pay stubs, and fake employment verifications. My name is Weiting Bollu. I am the CEO and co-founder of Openroom.ca. I've personally seen how easy it is to manipulate digital documents for tenancy purposes because my company aggregates these residential tenancy dispute court orders. And in these court orders, I know that many people land in court because they accepted a tenant applicant with fraudulent information on it. But the thing is, they didn't know. And that is why we've brought in Joanna Lang. Joanna is the managing partner and a level 2 mortgage agent at Outline Financial. With over 20 years in the financial services industry, working for TD Canada Trust and Scotiabank, she has earned recognition as one of the Canada's top mortgage brokers. In the resources section, down below, I've also got Openroom's 11-page tenant screening checklist to add on top of the insights that Joanna gives you today. Altogether, I promise you, you will not be disappointed. But before this mini course begins, here's a message from our partner. As a landlord, making your properties stand out to renters is more important than ever. That's why Rentals.ca offers verified listings, a free service that confirms your identity through Persona, a trusted third-party verification provider. Verified landlords get a badge on their listings, instant posting, and up to 3 times more leads than non-verified listings. With thousands of renters searching daily, getting verified makes your property stand out as a trusted listing that gives renters peace of mind. Get verified and list for free today on Rentals.ca.
I created this presentation in my job as a mortgage agent and having worked with a number of banks over the years and also in a broker space for the last 12 years. I've had a lot of, first of all, I own several rentals myself, and I found it more and more difficult to spot stuff and potential tenants just getting a little bit more tricky. And also I've had a lot of realtors that I work with reaching out, unsure about different aspects of the application and reaching out for help. So I have created this presentation just to focus on that. The focus is just to screen the tenants and how to catch things that maybe are outliers and figure out if the application is real and if it's viable. We're going to talk about rental applications, supporting documents, just diving deep into what we see on our end and how we spot things that might not be authentic. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about recent tale from the trenches, and that's always a hot topic. New to Canada, how to strengthen the application in the absence of established credit history, rent guarantee, and some other helpful resources. So first, a little disclaimer here. The purpose of this seminar is an in-depth discussion and analysis regarding best practices on how to screen potential tenants. There's no legal advice pertaining to landlord-tenant acts, no input on rental agreements, rental contracts, clauses, any kind of requirement for compliance, and no advice on how to deal with challenging tenants. There's so many aspects about dealing with tenants. This is just strictly me sharing my best practices when screening potential tenants. And that's the only part that I'm going to cover here. So without further ado, rental application and collecting information. So few things that I want to cover in this section. The application in the Ontario Human Rights Code, income and employment verification, credit reports, capacity to pay, public record search and their meaning tenants' digital footprint, ID verification, references and rental history, tenant interview. So first part of this is, and probably most of you, some of you being experienced landlord already know this, but just to jump in here, there's certain things that you cannot ask potential tenant because it's against the Human Rights Code. Every person has the right to equal treatment with respect to the occupancy of the accommodation without discrimination for race, ancestry, place of origin, color, ethnic origin, citizenship, creed, sex, sexual orientation, age, even marital status or family status or disability or receipt of public assistance. So while you can't ask someone, are you married, how many kids you have, you can ask them how many people are going to be residing in this property in addition to you. You can't ask anybody if they have disability, but if they disclose on the application that they are receiving disability income or EI or other public assistance programs, then you have the right to ask for income confirmation. But it's just how you ask the questions is very important. If obviously this is like a big topic of its own. When you get the copy of a presentation, I included the link on Human Rights Commission and rental housing. There's a very good article where you can dive into more details on that. So my favorite, one of my favorite parts here, income confirmation. And I'll tell you, I was going to show you a pay stub. And then, for client privacy, I'm like, okay, well, I can white this out, white that out. Let me Google pay stub. And I thought maybe there's some examples of pay stubs. Innocently, I Googled, ADP pay stub example. And I just started laughing because what popped up is pages and pages and pages of services that they'll create a fake pay stub for me. So that's just a perfect example what's out there on internet and how easy it is for someone to create fake documents. It's quite scary. So I am not going to show you a pay stub, but I wanted to talk about a few things and best practices, because it doesn't matter how well they fake it, usually things just don't add up. So someone who is salaried, they typically will have unless they work for a very small company, so we'll come back to that, but typically people will have a pay stub. They'll have an employment letter, and if they've been there for a year or longer, they'll have a T4. All those things can be faked, but if you get more than one type of confirmation, you can just start verifying things. If someone is giving you a pay stub, you have to take a look at year-to-date amount. Does this add up? If you have a December pay stub and they're year-to-date, if you have a December pay stub and they make 60,000 a year, but the year to date is only at 10,000, something doesn't add up. You're going to see if there is deductions for taxes. You can look at EI, employment insurance, and CPP. When the deductions go through, there are certain limits for every year, and when the guys fake it, they often put the wrong amount. But what's more important is looking at the letter of employment. The biggest mistake people make, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, they take the letter at the face value. What you need to do when you have an employment letter, go to the company website and compare. Does the logo there looks like this logo? The most common fake is who signed the employment letter. The best way to verify an employment letter is to actually call the number from the website and then ask for that person to be put through to, versus calling the number. Because if you call the number on the employment letter and the HR person answers hello, that's probably not a good sign. You could also, check out the person who signed the letter as the manager, HR manager, or whatever their title is, and then go to their LinkedIn and see if it's an established site and try to contact them from there. Because even if the right person's name is on the letter, it doesn't mean that the phone number is for that person, okay? I don't mean to be paranoid, but this is just one of the aspects. As we go through the application, if you start feeling that things are not adding up, then you might get so granular with this kind of stuff. The other thing with salaried people and verification, if you are getting, sometimes they'll send you a bank account history for other reasons. Maybe if you can see if a pay stub pay dates and amounts are aligning with bank deposits. Because a lot of times if people have a fake pay stub, they don't have 3 or even 1, 2, 3 months of pay deposits that are matching the amounts. And if they have pay deposits to the account, Is that just an account that was opened for the purpose of the application, where money comes in and money comes out, there's no other transactions going through, which could also be a red flag. People who are hourly, part-time, variable pay, lots of people work hard, have two jobs. But when assessing those incomes, you really have to understand, how long they've been able to maintain those two jobs. When the banks look at income and look at people who work part-time, typically they would want to see 2-year history. When people have two jobs, many people will just do it for a period of time, don't maintain it long term, and then you need to then understand how they're going to support the application. Cross-referencing the documents with each other is key. Don't just look at everything individually. Just try to cross-reference. Another big thing is when someone has a pay stub, they have their name and their address on it. So you want to take a look at the address, and if it's not the same as the address on the application, then you're going to look, is it a previous address on the application? What is it? That's always a good one to take a look at. And also, typically, a pay stub will have a bank account number on it or part of the bank account number on it. If that account number, like institutions have different numbers, if that's not jiving with the bank deposits, and you have a direct deposit going to TD, like TD is 004, but you get bank statements from RBC, which is 001, that's, something is not adding up here. Again, another thing to spot as an irregularity.
Sure.
Sorry? Another thing, when you're looking at businesses, and you start to look at, okay, someone works for the smaller business, and I think that sometimes we're seeing more, and there's a lot of good small businesses. It's not a judgment. It's just a fact that sometimes with smaller businesses, if they're just getting checks and so forth, it's harder to confirm income. Ideally, the person has worked there for a couple of years. If you ask for 2 years of income taxes, and then you're going to see if it's in line with the current income or if it isn't. If someone works for a very, very small business, then you want to look up that business and see what that address is. Like I've had situation where, someone works on the salary as a contractor, which is not a common thing, but not possible if they work for a big builder. But then you look at the employer, and the employer has the business registered in his basement, and they live in a residential property. And then you can pull I don't know if you guys have access, or maybe someone can comment, but if you pull a copy of a corporate search and see, and it's a very, very small business, 2 guys are working there, and then they wrote an employment letter to the 3rd guy guaranteeing him a salary. That person probably genuinely works there, but the question is, what's the stability of their pay? And in order to establish that, then you need to look at the longer history and look at 2 years income taxes. When you're getting income taxes, that's another really common fake. There are a few things that you can look at income tax when you're looking at someone's notice of assessment. Who is the commissioner? Often when they fake it, they'll use the older one. There was a different commissioner. You can Google that. From T1 to notice of assessment, the weird oxymoron is that if someone made $100,099, NOAA is not gonna say $100,001. They narrow down, not up. And most people, if they don't know that, they will round up, not down, but not the government. What else I was gonna say? So here I'm showing you maximum deductions on CPP for last year. Okay, so that's enough about that, I think. Determining the self-employment is the next topic we're going to talk about. So I think that a lot of people, and this has more to do with you figuring out someone's borrowing power and what their capacity to pay rent. So when you have someone who is a sole proprietorship, that's a person who is self-employed, and they have maybe a business account, but all of their business income goes through their personal income taxes. So then they're going to have their income tax filing, their T1, and then in there, there's going to be gross and net amount. So you know their gross income. Lots of people will have a lot of deductions that get to net income. Some of those deductions are more on paper, like depreciation, or there's a lot of different expenses that may or may not make sense. But if someone is a sole prop, you can see on their income taxes what is their gross income, how much they actually earned, and then again there's some write-offs, but how does that translate into? If someone is incorporated, that means that they have a corporation where they earn their money in the corporation, and then at the end of a year or any time they decide, okay, if I netted out 500,000 in my corporation, so I earned X amount of dollars, then I had my expenses, then I netted out 500,000 as an example, then they're going to choose how much to pay themselves personally. So from there, they might, let's say they made 500,000, but they don't want to pay so much taxes. So they only pay themselves 135,000 as a salary. And then they're going to pay themselves either T4 or dividend, or what used to be able to do is capital gains, but that's last year was 2024. But people who have corporations, they make more income than what it shows on their personal taxes. So if the numbers are not driving and income on personal taxes is low, but you want to make the deal work, then you have a right to ask them for their financial statements and see if they're making more money and they're just retaining it in the business. So other types of income here, okay? Spousal support, that's always a big one. And when banks look at spousal support, it's not just what's on the agreement, because there could be a lot of things on the agreement. You always want to see that that person is actually receiving the money, because they might have X amount coming on the agreement, but the ex-spouse is not making the payments. And if they don't get the money, they can't pay the rent. So you would want to see a history of them actually receiving money into the account. You will also know that if someone is receiving spousal support, and they said, oh, I've been getting it for 2 years, you have to report spousal support on your T1s. So you could ask them for income taxes, and whatever they physically got paid to them last year is going to show on their T1, on their income taxes, as income, because the person who is paying gets a deduction, and the person who is receiving spousal support has to report it as income. When it comes to child support, you want to know how old the kids are, because if you have kids who are 16 and 17, then chances are that child support is going to run out soon. Child support is not taxable, so the only way to confirm they're receiving it would be through bank deposits. It's not going to show up on income taxes because it's not taxable. Other sources of income: pension, CPP, OAS, bank deposits, tax slips, T1s are ways to confirm. Investment income is always an interesting one. If someone has they say, oh, here's my bank statement, I have X amount of dollars, or here's my investment statement, I'm qualifying based on net worth, not on income. You might want to ask for their income taxes and see, did they have any income in a previous year? Like, you're always going to get interest income or other investment type of income, or if the money is newer in their account, then you want to also better understand that. Rental income is not common for people who are renting, and I find that's always a curious one for me. If someone owns other properties and suddenly they're coming to you and they want to rent yours, and there's some valid reasons, okay? And you can't assume that it's a bad thing, but you really have to do your due diligence. Like, one of the tenants that I had owned his own house in New Brunswick, and he got relocated for work to Toronto, didn't know how long he's going to stay, so he wanted to rent my condo. Valid reason, perfectly fine. He owns there, and he stayed here for 2 years and actually went back to New Brunswick. But you really have to look at reasonability. If someone owns a condo downtown and they're renting it out, and now they want to rent a condo from you. Why? There's some additional questions to ask, um, because most of the time, if people own property, they're not going to go and pay rent to someone else.
Joanne, we actually have a question in the comments. Marissa, go for it.
Thank you. Really fascinating to hear about the cross-referencing of the documents. So the individual verification made sense, but you really got me thinking about the cross-referencing between, say, a pay statement and income tax statements or bank statements. And I'm just wondering about your experience or others with those third-party tenant verification services, platforms like SingleKey. Do they do that level of cross-referencing and checking?
I'll touch on that a little bit later in the presentation. I don't represent any of those companies, so I'll just touch base on what I've seen. But because I'm covering it a little bit later, if you don't mind, let's just leave it for that section, if that's okay.
Okay, that sounds good. And we have one more, and then we'll move on. So Ken, feel free to go for it.
Yeah, just one question. I was also impressed by the cross-referencing. It's been a little while since I've had to take on a new tenant. But the last time I did it, they worked for a large organization, a bank actually, and I was able to get the name on the bottom of the letter, who I thought was their manager, but he just forwarded me to the HR department, and they were willing to confirm that the person worked there and the duration, but they wouldn't tell me anything about validating his employment or his compensation. So I kind of had to take a leap of faith based on his job title and how senior he seemed to be. I got to believe there's another way or more than one way if the HR department won't give you the info, but I don't know what it is. So I'm just asking.
And in some cases, if you get an employment letter, you could ask to send the employment letter back to them to validate that that's a authentic employment letter, if they will allow you to do that. Some places, I agree, are harder to verify. But then if they say, yes, he works there, yes, this is his job title, then you can also, I think there's something to be said about reasonability of income and pay, right? Depending what they're doing.
Yeah.
And you can look at certain grids too. Like if someone is a teacher at TDSB, you'll know the grids of what's normal income and so forth. But I agree, it can be
I think
tricky.
that's pretty much what I did. I was in the same industry, so I thought his title and his income were kind of consistent.
Yeah, and then if you ask for a pay stub or bank deposit, and you can cross-reference that. So you have letter that's half confirmed, but then the pay stub cross-references in the bank account. And it's really much harder for someone to fake all of those things, because if you're looking at a pay stub and dates are aligning with a bank statement, and the bank statement transactions are aligning with each other, it gets a little bit too hard. Most people who fake stuff, they don't go that forensic, so that's the best we can do. Are we going to catch all of them? No, but hopefully almost all.
Awesome. Thanks, Joanna.
Okay.
Keep going.
Credit reports. So when people look at credit report, first of all, I don't know how it works on your end. I know with realtors can pull, they have services. At the bank, I can't just pull someone's credit for rental application. I can only do it for the purpose of a mortgage. That's my job. I have to have written consent. If you have a way to pull a credit report on your end and it's going to cost you the $15, I would say way worth it. Do it, because people do come up now with fake credit reports. When you're, if you can pull your own, SIN is not compulsory in Canada. You cannot force someone to give you SIN. You could pull the report without it. What people usually look on the credit report is kind of funny for me, because people say, oh, that person has a good score, so that must be good. I can tell you that this is a very dangerous way of thinking. Yes, credit score gives you an idea of a range, and you want it definitely over 650, over 720, but there will be sometimes people who have a worse report, but there's a one-off or an outlier, or they have a better report, but they have a ton of debt. So what I look at is, you already looked at your income, and with that salaried person, you said, okay, they're making X amount net bring home pay every 2 weeks. So I don't know, let's use something easy as an example. Let's say they bring $7,000 dollars home as a take-home pay. And then new rent is going to be $3,000. So they have $4,000 left over for their life. Then I'm going to look at their credit bureau report, and I'm going to take a look at, okay, they have a car payment. That will be X. Ooh, they have this credit card, that credit card, and all those debts. And credit cards usually have a minimum repayment of 3% of owing. So then you're going to start looking at all of those expenses and go ding, 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 ding. Because what you want to make sure is that after they've paid for their car and their debt and rent, that's a positive number, because they still have to pay for food and clothing and everything else. And I think that that's something that's not really done enough by people, is just look at the numbers. Can they make, do they have a positive cash flow? Some people will live on, very frugally. And I'm not saying that, we can't judge how much someone will spend on food, but look at the big ticket items and just see if there's enough income to cover those with a bit of surplus. Because if there isn't, then you need to find out who is going to cover the shortfall and how. Other things on the credit bureau, the account ratings. You will see R1, R2, R3, meaning revolving credit, 1, 2, meaning like credit cards, lines of credit. R0 means too new to rate, brand new account. R1 means paid as agreed. R2, they've had some payments that were 30 days late. R3, 60 days late. R9, bad news, bad account, written off, bad debt. The other area where you want to look at is public records, because people might have all kinds of things under public records. They might have co-signed for business loans, which is, again, not necessarily a bad thing, but you want to know. Car loan might be showing up on there, but it's not reporting on a bureau, or all kinds of other stuff. But I think the biggest thing is the reasonability of what's the income coming in versus expenses. If you want to be an expert on reading credit bureaus, that would be its own hour session. I have provided a link to Equifax course that you could take a course and learn how to read this in full detail, okay? And then there's all the different codes. Again, you'll have it, this will be provided to you. The other thing I didn't mention, and I maybe would like to mention, is when you're looking at someone's credit report, take a look at it. Is there a mortgage reporting, which is M? Or is there a line of credit reporting? Unless someone is a doctor, a dentist, or a partner in a law firm, average person in any other job is not going to have an unsecured line of credit with $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 credit limit. Typically what it means, unless you're one of the professionals, is that you have a home equity secured line of credit. So if they didn't disclose another property, you want to ask more, you want to look, or try to figure that out, because most of the big credit limit lines of credit are secured against real estate, or sometimes if they are a business owner, maybe it's a business loan. But again, more questions to ask. So credit score ranges are kind of, talked about that a little bit. What are good, very good, excellent ranges? It goes out of 900. I've never actually seen anybody with 900. And, people who have scores like 300, 350, 400, that is usually, there's some really bad news on that report. One thing that I wanted to say also, which was interesting. If you ever see someone who has like 400 inquiries on a credit bureau, I've seen that. Someone who had a thin credit history, not a lot of accounts open, but they had 400 inquiries on the credit bureau. And I'm like, why? That is so odd. Well, and then I asked the client, like, can you tell me more? And the answer to that was, oh, I went bankrupt 8 years ago, and now it fell off my record. And that was a long time ago. It fell off the record. He has rebuilt his credit, had established history, good job. In that scenario, that was fine and good enough for me. But sometimes if you're seeing that, then you maybe want to understand better what their situation is or how it went. Is there more questions? I'm kind of not good at doing both here. 1 second.
Yes, we do have some. And V. Peter, can you unmute? Okay, we'll come back to Peter. How about Emidio Pavone? Emidio?
Yeah, hi.
There you go. Yes, go for it.
Sorry, what, you said I had a question. I thought I typed it in. I guess you can't, you don't answer to. Basically, I wanted to know was on those, the previous, when you were talking about all the different types of, information that a tenant can provide you, like T4 slips, income slip. Are those required by, is that a requirement when somebody's making an application for tenancy?
Yeah, I think my understanding is that it's up to.
I think it's more like private, information that they don't want to divulge. I mean, are they entitled to divulge that?
So my experience as a landlord is that if they provide you basic paperwork and it doesn't satisfy your comfort zone, then you can ask for anything you want, and they can either choose to provide it or they can choose to suspend their application. But you as a landlord have the right to ask paperwork to satisfy income confirmation. And people.
I could ask any of those items that was on that list, the previous list that you had. That's my right to ask a possible tenant.
Yeah, and they can choose to proceed with the application and provide it, or they can choose not to provide it. But you have the right to verify their income that they are claiming on the income taxes.
All right, but they must provide you. You cannot go to an employer and ask to confirm what they make per year, or go to a bank and see what, ask for the statement. I'm sure they're not going to provide you with that. You have to go directly through the tenant.
When I go to my stories in the trenches, I'll share one with the bank statements. But thankfully, actually, no one can go to the bank and ask for anybody else's information. That's no one can do that. But you can certainly ask the client for statements, and you can ask them for the letter. And the bank is not going to confirm anybody's personal banking information, but typically the employer would, or you can start cross-referencing. But I agree, none of it is easy. So we're just trying to look at all the different points and try to see if information crosses somewhere in a wrong way. So
all right, thank you. I think I have an idea now what's what I can do as a landlord. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
So,
Joanna, one
yeah.
more question from Catherine.
Yeah. So can we ask them, can we check if they have a criminal record?
I don't know if you're allowed to, that you would have to look into that tribunal, the human rights, if you're allowed to ask for that or not. I actually don't know the answer to that question. I know as an employer in certain jobs you can ask that. I actually don't know the answer to that question. Sorry.
Okay, we're ready to proceed. Thanks, Joanna.
Okay. So back to capacity to pay and affordability analysis. And, I've had, knock on wood, that, it worked out for me. I've had a few situations where someone is making really good money and then they still have debt. They've had some variable factors, and I'm like, they actually can't afford to pay the rent. They have negative cash flow. And in those situations, I've had, where someone's parent would co-sign if someone was younger, or if someone didn't have good job stability. But I think the key thing in assessing person's ability to pay is looking at their bring home pay, trying to figure that out, how much they are netting, and then looking at their deductions. Is there a surplus? Is there a shortfall? And if there's a shortfall, then maybe, like I've had situations when I would say, I'm going to need a guarantor. I like you as a tenant, things clearly you doing well, but we want to add some strength to the deal. And, they can choose to do it or they can choose not to do it, but you have a right to ask if you're not feeling comfortable with their income level. Searching public records, okay? And I'm using the word public records in kind of a broader term. Anybody that's applying for rent, you want to take advantage of everything that they're posting out there for public to see. People are plastering all kinds of information on internet. It's there for you to see it. You're not doing anything wrong. Go and search. Look at Facebook, look at Instagram, look at their LinkedIn. Google search fields, like basic things. You can put tenant's name in the quotation mark and job and see what comes out, or word court. Or you can go to Openroom and then look at court records in more detail. But you can really search a lot of information and see what kind of stuff is popping up. You can also look at their credit bureau and see if they have any aliases, sorry, my Polish English, any other assumed names, so you can search those as well. And keep in mind that, not everybody is guilty just because their name pops up. There's lots of people with common names, and there might be another person who is a problem and not that person. So you really have to, if you see someone's name popping up with some bad stuff, then you need to take additional steps to do the due diligence to understand that, is this that person that's applying for your rent or some other person? The good way to ask, because, like for mortgage purposes, if you're suspecting that something is wrong or there's inconsistency in documents or a story, you can't say, oh, this information is fake, or I'm suspecting that this is bad stuff. That's accusing someone. That's actually not a right approach. And the right approach, in my view, is like, oh, I'm seeing this and this and this information coming up, or I'm seeing this and this doesn't match up. Can you tell me more? And if you approach it from a place that you give them some information and just say, oh, I see a discrepancy. Your pay stub shows that you are getting paid on the 15th of the month, but your deposits are showing up on the 20th, 27th, 28th. You already know that this is humanly impossible, that someone has that much pay delay on the electronic deposit, but you're not going to say that to a potential tenant. You're going to say, oh, I see that this and this, these things don't align. Can you tell me more? And you know what? In 1 in X, there will be a valid explanation and you're showing respect to this person. And in the other 99%, what's going to happen is people will say, well, actually, this and this and that. And then you have to make a decision on that. The other big thing that you need to look at, oops, sorry, what did I do? Is if there is no digital footprint. That's usually a big telltale as well. If they don't exist on internet, you also want to know why. And sometimes people have their histories expunged for whatever reason. Again, it could be perfectly fine. They just don't want to be on internet. But, vast majority of people will have some sort of record. They're from an employer or there'll be mention of them. They don't have to have social posts. But if there's nothing, then you want to do extra due diligence as well, in my view. And then, you can search your court records through canly.org. You can look at Openroom, corporate registry to verify businesses. There's some pages here that you can also use. You'll have access to all those links. But in some cases, it's just a lot of work to do the search yourself. ID verification, okay? There is, it just keeps going and getting better, right? There's so many different types of fake ID. I included the link here where you could just nerd over verifying ID for a long time as well. I just want to talk about some of the key points when looking at the ID. If you have someone's driver's license in front of you, and they are coming and applying in person, okay, take a look at ID. What's their height? Let's say I'm 170 centimeters tall. I don't count in feet. So I know that if it says 170 on this person's ID, but they're towering over me, something is wrong here. Because unless they are 19 years old and they just had a growth spurt, that's not gonna. You can measure the height against your own height when you're meeting the person. Eye color, age. If it says on the ID that someone was born in 1975, do they look like they're 50 or do they look like they're 30? Right, Mel? Maybe harder to say these days when you can enhance a lot of things, but still there has to be some reasonability. Driver's license document itself, last 2 digits are the day of birth. So if someone gave you their birth date, that has to coincide with last 2 digits of their driver's license. You can play with this on your own license. Digit number 9 and 10 are the year of birth. The 2 last digits of a year of birth. So someone born in 1980, digits 9 and 10 on their driver's license will be 80. If you get one thing out of ID verification, is the next thing. Keep in mind that provincial and federal ID can never have the same picture, because when you go to the province of Ontario and they're going to take your photo, you're standing in front of that screen and they'll take your photo and it's going to go on your health card, your driver's license, your Ontario ID. But when you go to a passport to get your passport, you have to go and take a photo somewhere else and bring it to apply for a passport. So there's humanly, physically impossible to have the same ID on both. Okay? That's like a really easy one. Make sure the ID is valid. Compare the address to the one declared on the application. And I don't know if people generally have access to MPAC, but you could search the address and see if your client is showing, whatever address, and they say, I rented there, see who owns it. Maybe they own it. So if you're starting to get suspicious about stuff, you can also pull the MPAC on the address. And if you do have access to third-party verification apps, way worth it, because you can pay the money like through all the realtors can do it now. Mortgage people can do it. We have a service that we put the client through, and then they will verify their identification. They have to go through the process, and it will verify if ID is fake or real, and if it's the right person on the ID. That's the easiest way to do it, and that's what I would normally do. Tales from the trenches. So, when you look at type of fraud, there's fraud for shelter, fraud for profit, and then criminal enterprise. So fraud for shelter, what does this mean? It means good people with good intentions and bad paperwork. So they have all of the intent to pay and to get into the property, but maybe they're just new, getting established, don't have stable income, and then they decide to fake the paperwork because they have no good way to prove that they can actually afford to pay rent, or maybe they can't afford to pay rent, but they're wishfully thinking that they'll get a better job or whatever is the case. And there's other people who, will try to move in with no intention to pay because they know how long it takes in a tribunal right now to hear the case and to kick someone out. So these are the scary ones when they move in, pay first month's rent, and then don't pay because they know that there's a certain period of time until they will be kicked out. But then hopefully that will become less and less because you're going to see, better reporting of those kind of cases, like Openroom. Next is fraud for profit. And this is this is an interesting case. I had this actually on one of my rentals. And the situation was like this. The guy who's applied to rent a unit. It was a newly renovated unit, really, really nice. And he said that he's been working in IT on contracts for last 6 months, and he's getting contracts from US, and he's making 10,000 a month. I'm asking for a bank stay, and he says he's self-employed, so he doesn't have a long history, and he's got this IT gig which he got in COVID, after COVID. So because he used to, but he says, I used to work in a restaurant, and then with COVID that didn't work out, so I started working in IT, and now I'm making 10 grand a month on his contract. So I'm like thinking, good for the guy to, you know, requalify. But typically, if you go from one job in the service to an IT job, then it's very hard to just land a contract that's 10 grand a month going, you know, into your account like right off the bat. So I'm like, good for him, but that sounds a little, you know, optimistic. And then I asked him for bank account statements. I got 6 months of bank statements and this nice letter about him moving in with his dog. And then I'm getting this account, and then all I see is 6 months. It was actually maybe 4 months. I don't remember. Deposits going in every month. The amount is going in, and the amount is going out. And there's really no other transactions, but money in, money out, money in, money out. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so if I went from making nothing to making 10 grand a month in my bank account, what would happen? I would maybe spend some of this money, use some expenses, but then my bank account would start growing, because if I'm making exponentially more money than I used to, where's all this money going? He was actually using this in an account to just use it as a proof of confirmation. It was in and out, in and out, in and out, and the account zeroed out every month. So we went back to him and just say, and then I also Googled where are all those deposits coming from. And the code on all the deposits on the bank account was from FX exchange house somewhere in US. So it was just like, how does this exchange place is sending you money and it's coming in and leaving? So we asked him a little bit more questions. So can you please tell me more, like what's about your income? And he fessed up that he wanted to rent a place to run an operation where he would have a few ladies just using it for business purposes. So that was a no for me. Another, you know, cases of fraud for profit are where people want to Airbnb your place or sublet it and so forth. Again, so you really need to understand, do I own another property? Why are they renting your property and so forth? Or people who want to run a business from your property. If someone is self-employed, you really need to understand what business they're in and where they work, because, you know, you might be perfectly fine and it might be okay for them to run a business from your place, but you might also not be okay with it. Let's say if someone is a hairdresser, and, you know, do they work out of a salon, or do they now are trying to rent a main floor apartment in your triplex because they're going to want to run the business out of their unit, right? So you need to really understand it, and and have a discussion with them up front, whatever are the rules and for your property and your complex and so forth. But it's always good to cross-reference that depending on what line of work they are in, and ask them questions. What are they hoping to do, and then make them aware what the limitations are. You know, criminal enterprise is the last type of property here, and that's when people want to rent the place and then take possession and maybe take title of a property. You've all seen that on the news, where maybe someone owns the property, they move overseas, and then the tenant then pretend to be the owner. They have fake ID, and then they try to mortgage the property or take title. In this kind of situations, 2 words: title insurance. Make sure you have title insurance on the property so that you are protected. Couple more things. Are we going over time here, Joanne, or am I okay?
You're doing great, Joanna.
Okay, not too many slides left. Tenant references. Okay, so Openroom is one of the sources. Just that you can really look stuff up, court order, disputes, very good source. Every single person that you have applying, I would, check them out on there. Landlord references. That's another really funny one, because someone might say, oh, little Johnny here was my previous landlord on the property at, 123 Main Street. You can go on MPAC and see if little Johnny actually owns 123 Main Street, because that's another common fraud, that people will put some other people's name as the landlord on a property that they didn't own. So that's really a good cross-reference. When looking at MPAC, then you can also, instead of calling that person who is a reference on the number provided, you can try to find them on LinkedIn and message them through LinkedIn. Oh, I got your name as a reference as a previous landlord. Would you be willing to give a reference? Versus just calling that number, because you don't actually know if you're calling the actual landlord.
Yeah, Joanna, I've had that experience, and quite a bit actually. And what I do when I'm calling their friend, landlord, is I'll try to trip them up and I'll say, what's the address of the property? Because if you're like me, I know where my friends live, but I don't know their exact address.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good one. I have another one which I thought was brilliant. Okay, think about if someone, so we keep going with 123 Main Street. So if the person is moving out of 123 Main Street and moving into your unit now, or hoping to move into your unit, go and see if they rented 123 Main Street through MLS. Because if they previously rented through MLS, the best place to go is call up the realtor who was the listing agent on that lease. Because if these people cause this stink, it's probably not yet reported anywhere, because they might still be in a dispute with a current landlord. But if they rented through realtor, guess what? That realtor would have heard and some about problems with a tenant. So that's an extra step, but I think it's a sure thing. Calling the realtor who was listing that property for rent when your client got it, if you can, look that up, it's priceless, because they'll for sure know. Again, calling references, we talked about that already, so I'll just skip. Is there any more questions, Joanne? I just want to see before I move to the next section.
Let me check for a minute here. No, I don't believe so.
Okay,
I
so
actually do have a question though.
sure.
Going back a couple of slides, or a bunch of slides actually, you mentioned that we can get information on public record. Could you go into more detail on that?
You can usually access some of the court records if you're looking at the court. It's public records, but it's only if people were sentenced and stuff like that. So you could go to Ontario court and look stuff up. Yeah. But you're not going to see things that are current or still pending. There are some services that can guarantee things, which I'll jump into shortly. Tenant interview is next thing. And, anybody who's owned rentals for a while, you should not ignore your gut feelings, right? And, it's I think you're not doing yourself a favor if you don't meet the tenants before they move in. And you're really or if you're working with realtor, that's a good realtor who actually has experience, because you want to be able to see if they're coming in to see the property, how interested are they in the property? Are they visualizing themselves in the space? Because someone who is doing it for criminal enterprise, or wants to Airbnb it, or anything that they're not actually going to be living in a space, they're going to have a different approach than someone who's like, oh, I'm going to move in here. And, how does the washer work? How does the dryer work? There's different levels. Everybody is different. But think about that. If someone is really thinking of moving into a place, they're going to be much more interested in details and asking you more detailed questions. When you're asking questions, ask open-ended questions to pick up on what they're worried about, right? Ask them why they want to move. That's a perfect question. What makes you want to move? And then they might tell you more than you want to know, and then you can make your decision based on that, right? What is the reason to move? You're allowed to ask them if they have any disputes with their previous or current lender, and see how fast they answer that, or if they're hesitating, right? Major red flag for me is if someone needs immediate availability. Vast majority of people are not going to be, it's the 25th of the month, I want to move in on the 1st. The only time that's really could be the case, if someone maybe like I've had one tenant that was the case because the wife was sick, they lived in Sudbury, and they were being relocated. They were relocating to Toronto to be treated at one of the hospitals, and she is going to have treatment there for 6 months. And then they got called that they're getting a spot and they're coming in. Valid. Or if someone is going through separation and divorce and then they're getting out of a situation. But you really have to listen to the story. What, like someone saying, oh, I'm moving out of my place to the new place, there's normally a couple months of runway. There is really very few good reasons why someone needs to move immediately. And that is a major red flag for me. Simple resources and tools. So there are some services out there right now that will do all of this for you. None of it is for free. I don't work for SingleKey. I don't have any affiliation with them. I just looked at the tool and it looked good. They approach it from a few different angles. Tenant reports. So they will verify income, employment, credit, public records, ID verification. They give you some kind of guarantees on it. You could pay as a landlord for a rental guarantee. And it's like an insurance thing that you can pay, and they will do income protection, property damage insurance, eviction resolutions to a certain degree. If you're interested in that, you should probably just reach out to SingleKey, but I just wanted to point that out, that they do have if you don't feel like you want to do all that work yourself, you could outsource it to a place like SingleKey or RentCheck or TenCheck. There's a few different services there. SingleKey is also great for potential tenants. That is actually a super exciting service. They create something called Tenant Passport. And this is actually super helpful for people who might be new immigrants or not super established, newly divorced, or just there's many different scenarios. They will verify a renter profile, where they'll fully vet someone who maybe has more difficult paperwork, that they can guarantee that. And they'll also, tenant could pay for SingleKey to be a guarantor on their application. And in some cases, if they have a weaker profile, but they feel they can pay and SingleKey is comfortable, they'll co-sign on people's leases. So that's, a valid service in places where now sometimes it's hard to rent if people are just getting started, right? So that's really it.